working against a nuclear plant now, 40 years later, in his area. They were foolish enough to try to reopen a nuclear plant in his neighborhood. And he was on his way to jail. He's from San Francisco, which I hadn't heard. I'd already gotten a very good impression of this guy from earlier speaking, and I wanted to talk to him and get to know him. And then he announced he was on his way to prison for refusal to cooperate with the draft. And I hadn't known that. In fact, I don't think anybody there knew that was going to happen. And I was thunderstruck by it. And everybody was sort of, he said, I'll be going, everybody in our San Francisco office of World District League has already gone. All the men have gone, and now it'll be just women. But he said that David Harris has run, for example, you've heard of him. And he said, I'll be happy to be going because I know that you people will be carrying on. And meanwhile, this was such a surprise to hear that because I've been thinking, this guy, not only have been thinking, I'm glad that all the foreigners here have had a chance to see it. There are a lot of people from all over the world, India, Vietnam, and it's because this is the best we have. He's one of the best we have. And then I hear he's on his way to prison. And I started to cry, and I went to a men's room in the back and didn't hear the rest of the speeches. I sat down on the floor of the men's room for about an hour, and I was crying hysterically for an hour. This had only happened one other time, actually, when I heard that Bobby Kennedy had just been shot. And these are all times in my life I remember having this particular reaction. And what I was thinking was, this is what my country has come to. The best thing that a young man can do is to go to prison. He could have gone to Canada, he could have gone to the National Reserve, he could have been a CO, but he chose the strongest way, like 50,000 others who faced legal process. 5,000 went to prison. This country owes them, I think, a great debt. They're the example they set. You know, there's a Leonard Cohen song. I think it's called Dress Rehearsal Rag, and the lines are, so it's come to this. It's come to this, and wasn't it a strange way down? Wasn't it a long way down? And that's what I was thinking, that my son, who was then 14, was born for prison. And indeed, the war was still going on. 4 years later, when he turned in his draft card, his registration card, they go to prison because they ended registration because too many people were doing that. There was too much resistance. And just by the way, I think the reason we're sitting right here at this moment in the middle of Market Street without yet, the Moses decided they didn't like the videos of that, they didn't like the pictures. The pictures of people who were sitting there peacefully and getting chemical warfare used against them right away. Now, if they had been throwing bricks and bottles and whatnot, the police really do know how to handle that. And they do it with the total support of the community. The community says, we don't want that. These people have got to be kept in line, and the repression can be carried forth. Some of you may have heard me say earlier, when there were violent protests by the weathermen and by others during the war, the report would go to the White House with the notation scrawled on it, great, good, this is what we want. And it wasn't just coincidence, because a lot of it was from provocateurs, in any case. Every trial of the anti-war people, the veterans and everybody, turned out to have an informer in that group. And but above all, the provocateurs who were saying, gee, I can get you some dynamite, if you want, that sort of thing. Or let's fight back. Let's defend ourselves. That sounds very, very plausible. Nothing is more human than to want to fight back physically. And by the way, I'm not a total pacifist. Yet. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. When it comes to defending my country against invaders, occupiers who are armed, and I would not use total nonviolence on that. When it comes to resisting armor. But when it comes to changing the country, changing the society and the world, what Gandhi invented, which was that the spectacle and the experience of facing over handled courageously and confidently the use of violence against you and not threatening back, but maintaining your stand on the truth is powerful. And what it does is not so much change the hearts of the people who are actually beating you at that moment. Actually, that's one theory of how it happens. I don't think that is the main thing. It does change the people who are supporting that process, the allies, the supporters of it, who don't want to be associated with that, and they lose the support that they actually need for those policies. If people had fired back at the military who were killing up to 100,000 people in Iran, under the Shah of Iran, the Shah, his family would still be there in Iran, actually, and the torture would be being gone by him if they'd fought back as they had guns to do. If the people in Tunisia had used violence against the police who were initially shooting them, Ben Ali, the dictator that we had supported for so long, would still be in Tunisia. Mubarak, likewise. In each of those cases, the police, in the heads of the police, starting with the lower level, didn't shoot, didn't want to shoot. Their bosses decided it wasn't good for them, it wasn't good for their power, and they turned against the dictator. It's what happened in Iran, it's what happened in Tunisia, it's what happened in Egypt. It hasn't succeeded yet in Yemen. It's not a guarantee. A lot of people can die. Syria, Yemen, Bahrain. Yeah, it's not a guarantee that anything will happen fast. I believe, and I'm not telling people what to do, I'm not even advising. I'm just telling what I think I learned by watching this over the last 40 years. In any case, I do know the power of that kind of example of just going to prison like Randy Keeler and 5,000 others. Because I felt that power on my own life. I sat there, I cried, and in the end I said, I wiped my face, I went to the wash basin, I looked at it and I said, okay, now what do I do to help end this war now that I'm ready to go to prison? And I didn't have to ask myself, am I ready to go to prison? Because with this example, I knew perfectly well when I was in Vietnam and I believed in the cause, and even when I didn't stop believing in the cause, I had exposed myself to death and endangerment on the roads many, many times. I'd been shot at. If I could do that, like hundreds of thousands of other Americans in a bad cause, then I could go to prison, like these people. Well, or I could do things that would lose my job, which is what really keeps people in line, not going to prison so much. So, I thought of a number of things I could do, and one of them, not the most promising, was to put out 7,000 pages of top secret documents in my safe at the Rand Corporation. Evidence of breaking treaties, lies to the American public, pretending that we were doing something just and promising when inside the documents showed they knew perfectly well this was just going to kill enough people to get this president through the next election without having lost Vietnam. Just like President Obama right now is determined to get through the next election without having withdrawn from Afghanistan and not subjecting himself to being called a loser, a quitter, a weakling, or anything else. A lot of people are going to die for that reason. And it's not a good reason, but it's a very presidential American reason. Now, so I decided that's one thing I could do. And I copied them. Ultimately, somebody was asking me here tonight about Bradley Manning. Well, Bradley Manning, taking use of the digital, is accused. How many people here know, how many do not know? Being honest, how many do not know Bradley Manning? You all know? Okay, well, you mostly know. He's accused of putting out hundreds of thousands of pages, which you can do now with scanning or the digital technology. Now, I couldn't have done that. I used the cutting-edge technology of my day, Xerox. I couldn't have done it without that. Little commercial here. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, so I put out as much as I could have then 7,000 pages of top secret documents. And and gave him to the Senate. They were afraid of putting him out, and I'm just going over it fast because most of you know it. I was put on trial. They tried to enjoin the press for the first time in our history. They enjoined the New York Times, couldn't print anymore, so I gave them into the Washington Post, and they enjoined the press. Then I gave them to the Boston Globe, and ultimately 17 newspapers, 4 injunctions, joined this wave of civil disobedience because the president was telling him every day, and the Attorney General, this is virtually treason. They used the word treason, though they didn't charge me with it because that would be unconstitutional, it so happens. They have to admit that aiding the American people was aiding the enemy. And they didn't want to do that, but they did for the first time indict me, prosecute me for 12 felony counts, 115 years possible sentence. For the first prosecution there was for a leak to the American people. And there have been 3 before Obama. I was the first for whistleblowers, for leaking. President Obama has brought 5 such prosecutions. And he's going after Julian Assange, would be 6. That would be twice as many as all previous presidents put together. So I actually, in no case really were those indictments constitutional, but the Supreme Court has never yet addressed that issue. Anyway, I thought, okay, this is one thing I can do. I've got documentary evidence then of all this stuff. I'll put it out. And ultimately it did come out in 17 different, actually no, it was the Times and Post. It was 19 different newspapers, and I was put on trial. Well, come up to the president. Bradley Manning is accused, as I say, of putting out 100,000 pages. He's in the military. So he's subject, he's not really fully protected by the Bill of Rights, as I was. He's subject to the Universal Code of Military Justice, which I'm sure a number of the police here are in the service and know what that's like. And it's not exactly the Bill of Rights, but you lose a lot of civilian rights when you go into the military. The courts have held. So he may well serve out the sentence that I was facing, life in prison, which is what I expected. Meanwhile, he was subject to something I certainly wasn't subject to. They put him in jail, and essentially they tortured him for 10 months in isolation. Now, a lot of people in this country are in isolation for prolonged periods in prisons, but the eye has been turned on that, in particular because of Bradley Manning. That is, in fact, a form of torture. The UN rapporteur, special person looking at the issue of torture worldwide, has been trying to get at Bradley Manning, and they won't let him see him, except in the presence of a guard, taping everything he says. They haven't actually let him in. Dennis Kucinich tried to see him in Quantico, where I used to be in the Marine Corps, in basic school. And I was ashamed of what the Marine Corps was doing with Bradley in this jail, keeping him totally isolated for 10 months. And Dennis Kucinich tried to get in there and see his conditions, was not allowed in as a member of Congress to see him. Now, that's not the democracy that we fought for a couple of years ago. I say we, the founders of this country. It was something like a constitution. At least 10 years ago, there was a coup by Cheney, Bush, Addington, the others, who I think fitted the definition in an oath that I took, as did Bradley Manning take, and all of them took. In the Marine Corps, in the State Department, in the Defense Department, where I was, in the Marine Corps, and every congressperson has taken the same oath. Every member of the government, every civilian and officer. The enlisted men take a slightly different oath. But every officer and every civilian takes an oath, and it is not to the president or the commander-in-chief. And it is not an oath to secrecy. I signed promises to keep secrets as a condition of employment a dozen times. I broke that promise, no question. But in terms of the oath of office that I've taken, the oath was to uphold and defend, support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And Cheney, Bush, Addington, the other lawyers were in the sense of that oath domestic enemies of the Constitution. Was obeying his oath, and that's why he's in prison today. Now, unfortunately, I have to say, the present administration, which I had much higher hopes for, not very high actually, but higher than what we've seen, has maintained these same unconstitutional practices ever since, without any question. Anyway, Manning finally, because of protests like this, and no other reason, finally was moved out of Quantico to the general prison population in Leavenworth. And still, he's been 2 years almost in prison, still hasn't gone to trial or faced formal final charges. That'll come. Now, I identified with this young man without having met him or been able. I wanted to visit him, but I couldn't. Right away, when I read that he had sent in the chat logs that led to his being imprisoned with an informer named Anya Ramo, and so happens. And it's not clear whether these chat logs are admissible in prison or not, in the court or not. They're hearsay. I don't know how that'll come out. But in the chat logs, he said, "I'm prepared to go to prison for life or even be executed." Wow. And I thought, I've been waiting 40 years to hear that from somebody. That's where I was 40 years ago. And I know how that feels, and it's appropriate. He's accused, I should say. Accused, we don't know, but he's the source accused of the video of the people shooting down people on the streets of Iraq. The civilian clothes, 2 of them Reuters employees, one with a camera, who was shot down. And they, WikiLeaks gave that the title collateral murder when they put it out. Well, now a lot of people criticized that they'd been so judgmental. Look, what we saw in that video, and there's an 18-minute version. How many people have seen that? How many have not seen it? Okay, take a look on Google or YouTube, collateral murder, that'll get you to it. And look at the whole version, 38 minutes of it. And there may have been people in that, it's not clear, who had one AK-47, which is not very uncommon in Baghdad in the last 10 years. But the Reuters person was mistaken for an AK-47 person holder because of his camera. And he's shot down. You see him crawling away in civilian clothes. Actually, this one was the driver. I think the cameraman was shot right away. And the driver from Reuters is crawling away. You know from the talk on the video that a ground squad is on its way, is just blocks away, and is coming to these people who are lying on the street. I think 15 or 17 people are lying on the street, shot down by this helicopter. So here's a guy crawling away, and they shoot him down as he's crawling down. I mean, it was a Reuters journalist. Okay, I was a company commander in the Marine Corps. I was a platoon leader. I was a battalion training officer. I won't go through that history. The point is that I had trained people on the laws of war and what they're supposed to do, and I knew that was murder. Not all killing in war is murder, obviously, but a lot of it is. And a lot of it has gone on in Iraq and is going on right now and in Afghanistan, and that was murder. Now, of course, nobody in the military has been disciplined for that shooting in that video, and what came out was, by the way, it was the same helicopter, it turned out, that a month earlier some people were trying to surrender to them. Arms down, hands in the air, waving a white flag, trying to surrender. So they call back and they say, what should we do to their officers? These people are trying to surrender. They say, well, you can't surrender to a helicopter. Shoot them. So they shoot them, shot them. Now that's murder. Shooting people who are trying to surrender is murder. But as 2 people testified, this was kind of an everyday occurrence. It wasn't the fault of the people in the helicopter in a sense. They were obeying the ROE, the rules of engagement. Those were the orders. So it's the people who gave them those orders who were criminal and would be subject to an international court in the absence of doing this. Okay, so why did Bradley, if he did do it, why did he do it? Well, he gave a reason in the chat logs. He said he had investigated, no, he had turned people over to the Iraqi police who were alleged to be dissidents or insurgents. But he had their files, and they were in Iraqi and Arabic, so he had them translated by the translator, and he discovered that they were academics who were protesting the corruption of the government. And that's why they were being turned over, as they knew, to be tortured. So he ran to his officer, the intelligence officer, and he said, look what we have here. This is terrible, you know, we got to change this. The officer said, to hell with that, that's not your job. Do your job. Get more people to turn over. Now, turning people, first of all, torturing, there are people in this country, in fact, a majority of people say, well, in a situation like this,
you got drowned out by the train.
Oh, sorry. I'm saying there are people in this country who have learned in the last 10 years from their leaders, including Cheney and Bush, who are unabashedly still saying, oh yeah, waterboarding, I ordered it. Fine, glad I did it, and so forth. Well, fine. They should have a fair trial for doing that. Be judged by a jury of their peers. Too late for impeachment now, but not too late for prosecution, actually. They're Americans. They have a right to their opinion, which is that torture is necessary, torture is therefore legitimate, torture saves lives. They're wrong. They have a right to say that, and they have a right, when they give orders to do it, to be tried by a jury of their peers, because that is a crime.
Yeah.
Whether it should be a crime or not, and it should be. It should be. But whether it should be a crime or not, it is a crime, and it still is a crime, and I'll tell you one other thing. It is a crime to turn people, it is a crime to turn people over to Iraqi police who are going to torture them, or to send them anywhere else. Now we've learned that we send people for torture by Gaddafi, you know, demon in charge, and the papers have now come out that we were sending people to this demon for torture, and to Mubarak also, and to Syria, right now. Okay, we were doing all that. That is as criminal as torturing them themselves, which we were also doing. And third, it is necessary to investigate any credible report of torture. Again, this is international law, and it is domestic law, U.S. law, and not just one law, but several laws. What was being revealed in the WikiLeaks documents that somewhere, and somebody, and I'll give Bradley Manning credit for it since he's accused, revealed was that President Obama is still turning people over to be tortured, and that is a crime. It is a high crime and misdemeanor for which he could be impeached. He's not going to be impeached, but it's an impeachable offense, and it's a prosecutorial offense, and it's shaming us if we go along with it. Bradley Manning decided not to go along with it. He knew it was being covered up, and by the way, he was told not to investigate further. Well, the WikiLeaks cables that came out show hundreds of cases of people complaining about the torture, reporting it. And in some cases complaining about it. And in every case, they get a stock order. Do not investigate further. That is an illegal order, which should, blatantly illegal, which should be disobeyed. As far as we know, one person disobeyed it. The guy who's accused of disobeying it is Bradley Manning, and that's why he's in Leavenworth. And we got the WikiLeaks disclosures. Okay. I put this out to show the top secret documents, which I had actually, that showed that President Kennedy, a Catholic president, had been complicit in the murder of a Catholic head of state. And why did he want to discredit the presidency like that? No, he wanted to discredit the Democrats because he was afraid that Ted Kennedy would run against him as another Catholic candidate. He wanted to show that Ted Kennedy's brother had actually murdered a Catholic head of state. So he leaked that out. That was one thing that came out, top secret, that my people hadn't gotten around to putting out yet. But he then learned that I had stuff on him, including nuclear threats against North Vietnam that he'd been making since 1969. So he had to shut me up. And in this country, at that time, to keep me from telling truths that I hadn't yet told, he had to commit crimes. So he sent people into the psychoanalyst office that I'd had a couple years before, and to get information with which to blackmail me into silence. It was often said that the point of that was to smear me. Well, they're already accusing me of 12 felony counts. What they wanted was to threaten me with stuff that I wouldn't want public, and that they could then get me to be silent. So they were investigating me very kindly. I have to say, Pat Buchanan, if you've ever heard of him. Pat Buchanan was touting the book and he was on Charlie Rose and said, he said, we in the White House, he was in the White House, he said, I was in a bachelor at that time, he said, we knew every detail of ellsberg sex life. He said, I told him not to put it out, it would only improve his numbers. They didn't do that, but they tried to get something on me that would shut me up. They didn't find that. They wiretapped without a warrant. I was overheard on warrantless wiretaps. The FBI lied about that, and that's in effect in the movie. Anybody seen this movie?
Yes.
Yeah, because you'll see there's a lot of talk there about his warrantless wiretaps he was doing for the White House. Well, when I was put on trial, they figured, these wiretaps will come out and will reveal that we're doing all these illegal wiretaps. So they got his number 2 man, William Sullivan, to steal from J. Edgar Hoover's personal files these wiretap records and put them over in the White House so they wouldn't come out. Why did Hoover have them in his personal files? Because it showed the president was ordering illegal wiretaps. They're illegal. As is in the movie. They didn't mention me, but that was the main thing they were after. The movie shows that when he dies on May 2nd, a date I remember, it's on 1972, I was on trial then. His secretary is busy shredding all these personal files because Nixon says, I want those files. Get them immediately. And before they could get over there, she's shredding the files. Now those files are in particular files of these illegal wiretaps. Why did the White House need all that stuff? A, because it was blackmail on members of Congress. He wanted it, not just Hoover. Blackmail on reporters. Blackmail on their sex lives, or everything, their financial deals, everything. He wanted that. Above all, it was illegal orders by the president, which Hoover was blackmailing him to keep his job. Nixon wanted him out of there. He said, no, if I go out, I'll have to tell. And it came out just 2 weeks ago. Nixon's transcript of his grand jury proceedings, where he's quoted. They're saying, this man, if we get rid of him, he may bring the whole temple down. Again, that was my wiretap stuff. And other stuff. His later attempt to kill me on the steps of the Capitol a year later, May 3rd, to incapacitate me totally. Done by the Watergate, people who were later in the Watergate, who had earlier been in my doctor's office in a criminal burglary, and now, eventually, after they tried to incapacitate me and decided there were too many friendly people around at this rally, that they would be caught. So they threw that, and that night, May 3rd, 1972, they cased their next job, which was the Watergate. And when they were caught in the Watergate, they now had stories to tell about the president that would bring him down or get him prosecuted. So the president had to commit new crimes of obstruction of justice, bribery, $140,000 to Howard Hunt, others to the others, all crimes of obstruction of justice, to keep them quiet in front of the grand jury about what they had done for the president to keep me quiet. This web of blackmail on which the government runs, and which the NSA right now, listening to everything on our email, our faxes, with the help of first illegally, totally illegally, and then with the help of Congress, trying to make it They have blackmail capability on every member of Congress, every source, everybody.
You down. It's only castles burning. Just find someone who's turning. You will come around.